Comedy is the mirror through which society can be seen.
There we go.
It can be concave, it can be convex, but it is always a true reflection of who we are.
Eric.
That was dropped in this episode by one Mr. Eric from Punchline Comedy Club, who was joined by the very, very fantastically, and you will understand it when you watch the episode.
My goodness.
The fantastically foolish
Yes.
Ty Gachira,
Yes.
who is one of, if not the best comedian in our country today.
100%.
I think we've just shot one of the most nuanced, complex episodes about Kenyans and African society that kind of we've had in a very, very long time. And it's just a testament to how intelligent and how much thought goes into the arts and into the new sectors of entertainment that are coming into Kenya today, man.
Yeah.
I learned a lot, man. I don't know.
Today's episode was an opportunity to go into a comedian's mind. It's a fascinating place because for them to do what they do, we learn how much they need to know about the society they're in and how much they need to calculate and hone their skill to give you that kind of experience. So to actually sit down with them and they're not on stage just having a conversation with you was one of my favorite experiences. Also, of course, there is comedy in there. Of course, there's some vibes. But I really, really think you're going to enjoy this episode. If you ever want to know how comedians do what they do and maybe why they do what they do, then this hour is where you're going to find out. So I hope you enjoy
This podcast half as much
as we enjoyed making it.
because we had a ball.
We had a ball.
Hey,
Come
enjoy,
on.
guys.
Enjoy. Hey guys, welcome back to another week of Mantalk.ke. Thanks for coming back every single week. Thank you for watching. If you're not sharing, please do. All the links to our socials are down below. As you can tell, we're back at our home, which is Kofisi. So thank you for Kofisi for being our location sponsor. We're back at 9 West, which is in the 9 West building in Westlands. We're in the knowledge room where you can host events, boardrooms, and if you want to come to Kofisi, you can come as an individual, you can come as a company. As a company, we recommend getting an office here, or if you're an individual, use the social spaces here. So all the links for that is going to be down below. Please check it out, see the rates, see if it fits with yourself or with your company, and thank you Kofisi once more. Today is very exciting. I think this season is the first time we've had 2 people as guests on set. So, do you want to tell the people what's going on here?
On the right side in the blue corner, we have the fantastic Mr. Eric Lusavali.
There we go.
Founder. You see that name? Eric
we go.
Lusavali. Founder of the Punchline Comedy Club.
Thank you.
Fantastic individual. You will not believe the wisdom this man has.
Yes.
And we have the fantastically foolish Mr. Ty Gachira.
Wow. He's right next to you.
The fantastically foolish Mr. Ty Gachira, one of my favorite comedians who's also a lawyer. I can't wait to kind of learn from this guy. So guys, welcome to the show today. We want it to be absolute bands, as crazy as possible, man. It's a huge honor to have you two on set. Off camera, we've had so many insightful conversations. My mind is still like combing through. And so guys, welcome, man.
And now we're at the bottom of the barrel.
Exhausted the whole topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So how do you guys feel, man? How do you feel to be on Mantalk.ke, Ty?
No, it's I watched this, so it's good to be there. Also, I also know that you have a significant female audience, so that's the only reason I'm here today. Because hey, ladies. yeah. Otherwise, ningekuwa kibe.
So that's how you're feeling.
That's how I told you. Fantastically foolish.
No, I'm not like yeah.
Oh man, dude. Eric, please.
I feel amazing. It's such a pleasure to be welcome to like this space. I think we've tried to do this before, but then like we had different schedules and everything.
Yeah.
But it's always interesting because we interact on so many different levels and spaces. It's interesting now for us to interact with you guys in your space because most of the time we interact in our space. So this is very interesting, very exciting.
Karibuni sana.
Yeah.
Santi.
Yeah, so
welcome.
anyone watching, if you're not familiar, these two are comedians. So I've always wanted to ask a comedian this because it's like a phrase that people say, but I don't know if it's true. They say that comedy is about timing, and I'm just curious: is that
Wow.
Yeah, that was bad timing.
I watched Oscar's face drop like, buddy, it's a podcast. Cool.
Yeah, I was worried. I would lie. I was worried.
I thought he was.
We're not.
I honestly thought he was having a stroke.
Yeah, I was worried.
yeah.
I was worried. I will not lie. I nearly fell off my chair.
No, that wasn't actually the
We will
question.
endeavor. We will endeavor to.
I'm joking. Sorry, that was shocking. I know. That was the point. No, generally, the actual first question is like, this podcast is all about masculinity, and trying to change the narrative online about, you know, men in society today, because I think there's a lot of toxic content out there. So our role when we started it was like, let's be a positive light in society right now. So we always like to ask, to sort of counter what we see online, guys and girls that come on here, what's one thing as men that you give to society that is positive?
I don't know if I can speak on behalf of men because there's lots of them out there, but speaking as a person who is, first of all, I am a brother, I am a son, I don't know. But I think it's really down to two very simple things. It's just common decency. I think it's just common decency. For me, the lines don't even go through like, oh, it's men and women on one side or the other. It's just common decency. How would you like to be treated? How would you want to be received in any space or with any regard? And so it always just comes down to me is like, we may draw very many lines and say, oh, this has to happen, this has to happen. But as a man, I believe that my role in this life and in the next life is just to bring common decency for everyone, and also just offer the same opportunities that I have had. Because a lot of times you always speak about equality, but it's about equity at the same time. If we're looking at two people, one of them needs to go up the stairs and maybe they're in crutches. The stairs are the same, like it's the same flight of stairs. But if one person is in crutches, they need equity. They don't need equality because that's the same staircase. Yeah.
Damn. And second
Powerful. I'd hate to go after that, Ty, but
like, I was just thinking, okay, that answer out. That answer, oh, he went to equity. Okay, now. Like, no, but did you mean like men in general or specifically
what do you contribute
to society? My dad would disagree. No, but I think first I think I use humor to make people laugh at themselves and be vulnerable in spaces where we are taught not to be vulnerable. I think humor is a good space for us to see the dark sides of ourselves, and I'm happy that I have this gift that enables people to be off guard as they express themselves. Yes.
wow. Yes. I am as surprised as you are, ladies and gentlemen. No, like legit. Like, you have no idea. I'm such a fan of the work that the both of you do, and this will lead up to kind of my the next question, which is about kind of your origins and your upbringing, right? Give us the story of where you came from and kind of your formative years and how that has contributed towards the men who you are today and kind of your vocation, because you guys are just fantastically hilarious. Like, from a young age, did you kind of discover comedy, or did you when did you find out that you're funny? Basically.
Eric,
No, please go.
Okay, so I always tell guys I'm a rural to urban migrator. I grew up in Nyeri and I came to Nairobi because that's where all the jobs were, and so we are the guys you build a wall to keep out. So like I would say Mexicans, but we're not from the south, so more of White Walkers, yeah. So because we are from the north, but the thing is, I think I grew up I think humor-wise, my mom was always the funniest person in the house. Like like a lot of homes, people are raised with a lot of, hey, we love you, you're the best. My mom raised us with a lot of banter. Like, it was always like, she expressed her affection with us by making us laugh or using nicknames for us, or she'd come and tell us something that happened today, which made us laugh. And I think maybe that contributed significantly to humor being a way of just life in general and expressing thoughts and things like that and having difficult conversations. But also, I think, so I grew up it was like semi-rural. It's not Nairobi, but I wasn't like in a village setting.
Yeah, I get that.
So school was a big part of, because I realized in school I wasn't athletic. I wasn't the best looking person in class. I was So what was my thing? Like, what would be your thing, right?
Ty, you are fantastically good looking, sir.
And athletic.
No, puberty
And
was
athletic.
Puberty was kind. No, okay, not quite. I have stories about that. But I'm saying, no, but I think with regard to humor, growing up there really helped. And coming and having cousins like who come from Nairobi and tell you about the big city and all this that happened made me have a lot of different lives that I'd live, because I'd go to school and it was a really nice school where they had swimming pools and everything. But then I'd still come back, and like having a lot of lives that I lived as a small child really helped a big part of humor as I am now.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, I think I agree a lot with what Ty is saying. For me, it was quite different. I even right now I still question if I'm funny or funny looking is one of those. But
one of them,
yeah. But it was very difficult for me growing up because this just came like recently. But then back then, people didn't know what neurodivergence was. So you find that a lot of times, a lot of people do not understand how someone who has neurodivergence basically functions. So up until this point, I feel like a lot of what I consider humor or whatever is actually unacquired, like it's learned behavior for me. So it's learned behavior. It's about being able to observe a condition and look at it from very many different levels. So growing up, I didn't really think I was funny.
Yeah, just not to stop you, but what exactly is neurodivergence?
Oh, so neurodivergence is basically what they call people on a spectrum. So you have like an autism spectrum. Okay. So you have one side of the spectrum that has people who have very like lots of difficulties in terms of learning or even functioning. Yeah. But then on the other side of the spectrum, you have what they call highly functional individuals. So you have people who have maybe Asperger's. And so this is a person who may be able to like consume information and keep it and store it and transmit it and function very highly. But then that comes at the price of you're not, for instance, all my emotional awareness is a learned habit. So at times I may speak to someone, and for me, it's really about getting from point A to point B. It's not really, I don't know how to navigate those social situations. So when someone asks me, how was that performance? It's like, that was terrible. Instead of me saying, oh, you could have done this. So all of those situations are very learned. And I think Ty will attest to this. Like even when I was first joining the comedy community, a lot of people thought I was a horrible person. But then it's simply because... still think. But it's simply because those are traits that I have to learn. So it's something that's very taxing, but it's also something that's very important, because then you learn how to appreciate other people's perspective, because it doesn't come naturally. So when people are like, oh, empathy. So for instance, if someone loses a loved one, the first thing I think is not like, oh, that's horrible, it's a huge loss. The first thing I think is, do they have hospital bills? How are they going to settle that? What role was this person providing in their lives in terms of providing security, in terms of providing financially? Those are the thoughts that come to my head. So a lot of times my wife is always like, that is great, but the first thing you're going to say is, I am so sorry. And so it is all learned behavior for me. Yeah.
Mike, I had no idea that was a thing.
I'm telling you, this podcast today.
I
was like, the sauce. Okay, please ask the next question.
Yeah, please. So I'm curious, like within an African context, right? Nurturing the talent of somebody that is funny is not like the linear path. You don't think, I want my son to be a comedian. Yeah. So how was the journey from like formal education to deciding this is what I want to do? Because I believe you went into law. Yeah. So I'm curious to know those paths from being like, mom, dad, this is what I want to do, or even you at that formative age, like this is the path I want to go down. Yeah. When was that realization that I want to go into comedy for both of you?
Yeah, I think like there's a movie, I don't know whether it's Disney or Pixar, which I watched sometime last year, called Soul.
Yeah,
it's called Soul. Yeah, Soul. Yeah, and that was, I think, one of the best animation movies I've watched, because for the first time I was watching a movie and the star was a middle-aged man who was still trying to find his purpose in life, right?
Yeah.
And for me, comedy came like way later in life. I didn't even think that it was a thing I'd pursue, because I used to be a dancer. I remember we won some national event that time when Step Up was a big thing. I was the guy for tutting. Okay, now guys, let's go 1, 2, 1, 2.
And what was the name of it? Because it was based in Nyeri.
No. This was when I came to Nairobi.
Insane.
Yeah. So we are called Incense, and then there's something called Sparfest.
Yeah, Sparfest.
Yeah, so like we won Sparfest. Huh?
So you were in Incense?
Yeah.
Hey, dude. Nice. Hi, Ty. Hi, Ty. How are you doing?
Good, yeah.
Hey, this is a celebrity.
Who's fantastically foolish now?
Fantastically foolish. So, Ty Gachira.
So like I always liked art. Like then I tried
Sparfest, that's
Slam Africa.
Yeah.
I remember I became number 2 at Slam Africa because that time I was told your comedy is too humorous. Like I mean your poetry is too
I was gonna
humorous.
say, yeah.
Like you're like like poetry is very, how do I put it? Victimy. Oh, we are black and we have been killed and we have been la 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 la.
Yeah,
Then you snap. And then, but comedy is like almost like the right wing of art. Like we make fun of situations as they are. So for me, it's like it was a journey that went on. But I think the first time where my folks really accepted that, okay, this guy is a proper comedian, was when they saw a newspaper clipping. Yeah, because I had told my dad I was doing comedy because I had picked it up because after I left spoken word, there's something called BYSS, you know, because you say so, the improv thing with Jason Bruno, and so the thing is I was really broke at the time, and I always wanted to go to the show, but it was really expensive for me at that time to go to the show. But then this one time they sent out flyers saying that stand-up comedians wanted. Right, so this girl tells me, I think you're funny, right? And I'm like, you know, if you're a guy, like that's what I've heard, you know. But I'm saying the thing is, I wanted to take a girl out to watch BYSS, but I could not afford the tickets. So the only way I could get into BYSS was if I applied to be a stand-up comedian. So I didn't really care for being a stand-up comedian. I just want to take someone out, and then have a good time and be funny and just look at my heroes just making people laugh, right? So when we got there, that's when I went on stage. It was horrible. It was like people are really good the first time they try comedy. But it was decent, right? And I think that's when I met other comedians who told me, there's a scene I think you like. I had like 2 jokes that I used to say everywhere, like that worked, you see? And I think that's how I got into the comedy scene. And now that's when I think I started meeting other comedians and got like, before I was a stand-up comic, I was just like, I enjoyed the camaraderie that around it. It was something that you could be good at. There wasn't too much pressure like poetry. We were underground, so I really enjoyed it. I think that's how I got into.
How did the date end? Sorry, I have to ask.
No, she enjoyed it. She's like anything wrong that happened after that was not because of not because of the
performance. Oh, your performance. Okay.
Hello.
We will never know. We will never know.
So please.
I think for me it was different. I didn't grow up thinking I was funny. I really didn't know how to get into it. So by the time I was getting into it, unfortunately, none of my parents were alive. So the person who is basically the only family I have in the world is my brother. Like, other than my wife and like kind of her family, like my brother is the only. And my brother is one of those guys who, growing up, we have an age gap of almost 9 years, actually almost 10 years. So it's 9 years, 11 months and a couple of days. Like, it's a huge gap. But he was very good at what he did. He was like, he even right now, he says, oh, I'm going to learn French. And 2 weeks later, this guy is an intermediate, like, speaker of French. He just picks things up and he was very good. So it was always a lot of pressure for me to try and keep up with what he'd said. But he's one of those guys who's really supportive. So he didn't understand exactly what it was, but he was like, oh yeah, because when we were younger, he'd be like, oh, I'm bootlegging like films and stuff. What do you want to watch? And I'd be like, oh, I'd want to watch some Def Jam comedy. And he'd basically bootleg that for me and I'd watch it. So by the time I was telling him about stand-up comedy, he was like, oh, that's nice. Go for it. But we did a show this year, Distant Relatives. And that's the first time he came and saw what it is we do. And he was just blown away. And he was just like, dude, like, I'm so proud of what you're doing. I really, and this is the same guy who's basically taken money and given it to me. He's like, here's $2,000 towards your comedy thing. I think for me, I'd say as far as family goes, like, my brother has been extremely supportive, even though he did not understand what it was. He was very, very supportive. But by the time I was getting into it, like, seeing that I didn't have lots of family or friends, it was just like a thing. So for me, it's been one of those very lonely journeys that you always take,
Yeah.
But you just take it because there's nothing to lose. That's the thing. I always say the most dangerous people in the world is a man without fear and a man without anything to lose.
Yeah.
So I would always just be like, I'm going to do this, and you just do it because you don't have enough people to like admonish you or stop you or whatever. And I feel like that is a gift and a curse, because for a lot of comedians, even right now within our circle, for them to tell their parents that I'm going into stand-up comedy. I've had very difficult conversations with some of the comedians in our, like their parents in our scene. Like a parent calls you and says, why would you let my son do this? There's one comedian whose parents are abroad and he lives here, and he basically quit school to focus entirely on comedy. And they called me and they said, how could you do this? Do you know how much money we've spent on this kid? And I was like, how could I do this? How could you do this? Not let this guy pursue this. So I think perceptions are changing, but for a lot of people, like the barriers to entry, I think we're very lucky to have that type of support, because the barriers for entry for a lot of comedians who are in the scene right now are so high.
I hear that. And I just had to ask, like, your personal journey with conceptualizing comedy as being a vocation. And conceptualizing comedy as being probably one of the biggest entertainment markets in Kenya. I wanted to know that from you. How was your journey in kind of seeing a market and making it?
I think especially for Punchline Comedy is that Punchline Comedy is a brand of a company called Sticks and Stones. It's a creative collective that does so many different things, because we have all different like creators within the outfit. But at that particular time, by the time we were starting Punchline Comedy, it was because we had been doing like lots of events. We'd done like 6 a.m. events, like electronic dance music. We had organized corporate events. We'd done even literally events with guys like Story Moja. So we had a lot of experience. And by the time we were getting into the game, there were already pioneers. There were guys like Doug Mutai of Stand Up Collective, who already started something with Karura Comedy Club. Him, Emmanuel Kisiangani, I think Amandeep Jagde, Mamito Yunus. All of these guys had started something. And there was another guy called Brian Onjoro who had started Nairobi Comedy Club. However, by the time I was coming onto the scene, you could see a lot of gaps. And unfortunately, as a person, my personality is really about structure. I think even when we're in the writer's room with Ty says, I can always know what jokes Eric wrote because there's a way that they're structured. So I'd come in and I'd see a lot of like gaps, and I'd be like, oh, we can fix this and we can change this and we can make this into this. But those guys, number one, already had, if you have your own thing, it's very different when someone else comes in and says, change this. So it got to a point where I was like, there are efficiencies that we can basically evolve and make better. There's a way for us to be able to give opportunities to more people, expand it, basically make it faster, stronger, smarter by investing in this. But then also looking at it is because very early on, I think it was in 2013, I'd spoken to a friend of mine who was based here. I think he's still based here. His name is Eric. He used to have a restaurant called The Karag at the Ngong Racecourse. And I was like, the next big thing is stand-up comedy. And he was like, find comedians. I'll give you this space. You can do whatever you want with this. You can do whatever you want with this. Find comedians. And I couldn't find comedians, but there was a lot of work that was going. So by the time we were discovering like comedians like being there, I had already thought there is a market here. Because when you think about it, Kenya has done everything. We bring in the biggest stars. So we bring in Conscience, we bring in, I don't know, Shaggy, we bring in Diamond. We've done everything in terms of film. We have Lupita Nyong'o's from here and everything. But the one segment that we had not looked at is comedy. And at that time already we had Churchill who was doing lots of comedy, but a lot of times it was very difficult, especially for people in my circle, to relate to it. Because I remember there are guys who went for the Laugh Festival and they came out and they were so upset because they said, we couldn't understand anything. It was all, they do a setup in English and then the punchline is in Swahili every single time. So for me, the idea was there's a gap here. There's a gap here, and if we can do this and we can evolve very, very quickly, it's going to lead to a point whereby there are people who are earning money. Because I've seen it happen abroad. I've seen people, music making people ridiculous amounts of money, poetry, writing, film. And when you look at things like Russell Simmons of Def Jam, he made Def Jam comedy the biggest thing there was. So already, even from back then, I knew that this is the next frontier. Yeah.
I think for me it would be different because Eric, at least he talks Eric has a perspective of the institution, right?
Yeah.
As an individual, when I tell this could be a vocation, I think 2018, I told myself when I turned 30, if comedy has not brought me anything, money-wise or satisfaction-wise, I'm out, right? So I turned 30 this year. And the day I was turning 30 is when we were wrapping up
TMI.
A TV show with my name. And that's the same time we were coming from distant relatives where we had like guys from South Africa. And so like, I remember when we were going out after that night, I was like, yo, this was the day I was supposed to quit comedy. Like this was, because I'm going to give this everything. I'm going to write every day. I'm going to push and see if I can just be on someone's stage for 5 minutes, I'm going to take them. If the opportunity comes for me to even host a birthday party for a 2-year-old, we are baby shacking that day, you know. Yeah. But at least, so like I told myself, if by the time I turn 30 and this comedy is going nowhere, I try to be very pragmatic about life, but with some sense of idealism. Like my idealism I'll push it up to a certain place and be like, okay, so
what are the results?
What are the results? And then
Well, man, and isn't it an inspirational story coming from both of you? I mean, from Eric's perspective, because he's playing the whole market and he's seen a gap and he's filled it rather successfully, and obviously we'll get into details about that. And from your perspective, because when I discovered Punchline, I discovered Punchline through you. Yeah. Because the kind of the content strategy that Punchline has employed is to get your content, online. And when I saw it, and I told you this off camera, the most interesting thing about your brand of comedy for me was the contrast. Like you deliver stories with such interesting contrasts, and you socially kind of critique the society I'm in a way that even I'm like, man, this guy, like there's a lesson in everything he says. And man, it's been just incredible to kind of experience you guys live. And I encourage anyone who's kind of watching this to experience Punchline Comedy live and Ty Gachira's show as well on TV, man.
So you've mentioned, how you've kind of made it a vocation, but as an audience member, a lot of the time we get to see the final product, right? We get to see what's happened behind the scenes. And I've always been curious to know, as comedians, the process of thinking somebody is going to laugh at this. Like, where do you guys draw from, and how do you, at the risk of ruining it for the audience, like how do you actually get to that point that this is going to be said on stage? Like, what's that journey like? I'm very curious.
I think it's different for everyone. I think it's different for everyone, and I always say this before we start our shows. I always say the role of the audience members, they may not like what we have to say, but it is their duty to defend our right to say it, because I think that stand-up comedy plays a very important role in that it's a retrospective, introspective, and perspective look at ourselves and society.
Rewind that. Say it again.
So it's a retrospective, introspective. So we're looking back, we're looking inside, and then we're looking forward, perspective. And that's very important. And that means that it's very difficult for you to be vulnerable enough to get a mic and get on stage. It is one of the hardest things to do. And so the process of choosing, I'm going to start this and I'm going to say this on stage is very different for each comedian. But the one thing that I know binds us all is that there's a truth inside us that we truly believe, and we want to share that truth with other people. I always say stand-up comedy is about finding enough people who agree with your madness. So the more people who agree with your madness, the less mad you are. But that process of sitting down and saying, I'm going to say this and I'm going to say this, it's a truth. There's a truth inside us that we see something and we're like, I wonder how many other people agree or see this the same way I see it. Or I wonder how many people do not see it the same way I see it. But as soon as I express it, they'll be like, that's true. This guy is talking facts. That's my thinking. Wow. So the process is always, for me, it's always, I have this truth and I want to share this truth. So at times you write down your set and you go on stage and say it. Sometimes you just go on stage with an idea and you're like, I'm going to let this idea breathe and walk, and we see where it goes from there. And then like a lot of, and the people don't know this, and this is behind the scenes, a lot of us comedians record our audio and video not for putting out, but for us to be able to listen back and say, oh, okay, there's something there, or I could have done that better.
Yeah, it's incredibly detailed, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think Eric has spoken to the substance of what we write. Maybe I'll speak more to the technique, right? Comedy, like, two people can tell a story, and you want to listen to that person tell the story. Like, your friends could have, but the person I need to hear you tell the story, right?
Yeah.
So the comedian is, yes, he has something to say, right? But how does he say it to you in a way that you will want to hear what he has to say, right? And so that's where now the techniques of comedy get in, right? Because it's like every person has that spark. Like, we have that je ne sais quoi. Like, there's that thing you have that I don't have, and if I wanted to have it, right? But then now there's the structure element of that I need you to get these basics correct, so that whatever comes out after that is good. So like, I need you to work on your stage presence, right? I need you to find your voice. I need you to see, there are things in comedy we call the rule of three, callbacks. There are things we call like diversions. You see, it's like just coming down and telling someone, oh guys, you will not believe what these guys, our local kinyozi was arrested jana for selling bang. Like, yo, I didn't even know he was a kinyozi. so like, there's that, because you see, comedy is taking you on a journey. And then
Twisting it.
because the technique around comedy is I'm creating tension. And the bigger tension I have to create, the better I must be at diffusing the tension. You see,
Right.
So like with that joke, I know I did it first of all, like when I said, hey, my mom called me yesterday and she was like, yo, hi son, how you doing? Praise God. I just joined the LGBTI community. And I'm like, okay, mom, what's that? She's like, yeah, my Bible study is called Let's Go Back to Israel. So you've created tension, right? And then when you diffuse the tension, now that's comedy. So Eric talked to the substance of what do I want to talk about. And now the technique is what makes you a ranter and this person a comedian.
How do you discover the techniques? Is it try and error?
That's the question,
Is there
at first it's maybe everyone has like a natural knack for maybe humor, but then when you get into it, you realize I want to become a pro. Like, I don't want to become a run-of-the-mill kind of guy. People have done this before. People have written books about comedy. People have... So, like, now, today, I'm writing... I want to talk about, politics. But inherently, I want to test a technique like a callback. You see, like, when you watch Kevin Hart and he says, all right, in the beginning, right? At first, it's not funny. By the time he's saying it at the end... So, a callback is something... It's our secret between the audience. Like, I told you something, but I'm going to bring it up later. You don't know it's good, but that's... So by the time I say it back this time, it's like so hilarious because you are not
like Dave Chappelle's writing his joke backwards.
Exactly. You see, so what makes a good comedian and a bad comedian is not necessarily what they said, because a comedian should be allowed to talk about whatever. It's the technique in which they're working with.
Man, I guys, like, man, I'm enjoying this podcast.
because we just enjoy it.
Yeah, we just enjoy it. Like, we just like, I'm enjoying this.
Send the invoice tax.
Man, and this is why I called you guys fantastically foolish, because you guys are fantastic at like making something so kind of scientific and so nuanced to come out in life. And there's a podcast I enjoy called Diary of a CEO, and in Rory Sutherland's interview, he said the person he looks up to the most is I think it's one of the people is Dave Chappelle, because comedians are one of the most nuanced people, most complex human beings, because they have such an understanding of society. And politicians come off as the more bland, boring, and how we wish sometimes that comedians could occupy these seats, because they perhaps could critique society in a more realistic and real way.
Enter Ukraine.
See, it just happened. Like, it didn't even take him 2 seconds. He already, like, you get what I mean? Like that, like, man, I'm so happy to be here.
Just in relation to that, the funniest thing is that the people who are always most offended by the things we say on stage are the people who are the farthest away from it.
No, I think dark humor, or as they call it in South Sudan, humor. Like, technically, even law was for the smarter artistic people. You know what I'm saying? Like, but you don't realize the logic that could, the logic required to do, like, all those things that are required is a sense of, like, this is a brain that, yes, he can be this, but he chooses to be a comedian, right?